mental health.
Let's talk about mental health. Yeah. So welcome to my friend and sister. For some reason, I'm looking at you and I can see your sister.
That's funny.
It is funny.
Strange. No.
Yeah. But yeah, welcome, Faith. Last time we had a conversation with Tenda, who's not available at the moment because of exams and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So funny enough about him is that he had actually started going off the radar from socials and everything, and because of the exams. Then, for some reason, his phone just died.
Oh, wow.
So his phone is dead.
Oh my gosh, okay.
And it's just helping him. It's just something that has just helped him to say, no, you know what?
Just focus, because it's hard.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is about your phone when you need to study. It becomes so much more interesting.
It does, eh? And those are the things those are the hardest things that we go through in life, eh? And it makes it even worse now that there's things like TikTok,
Imagine.
Yeah.
Our biggest problem was Mix It.
Yeah.
Mix 33. Those are it.
And when Facebook started, it was like a big thing,
It was a big thing.
Yeah.
So, no. Now there's a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah. And
I remember my marks dropped when Mix It was a thing. Like, we were always on Mix It in class. It was bad.
Yeah. No, I didn't get to do like you had the group chats in Mix It. I didn't get to do that. I just chatted with people. So I never really had an opportunity to do the group chats, which was kind of like a lucky thing for me. Yeah.
Yeah. So the group chats but they were entertaining, I won't lie.
They were. Yeah, I could see from others, that they were. Yeah. So so Tenda's not around. So today we just gonna be talking with Faith, Dr. Faith Mahlangu. I gotta address her the right way, otherwise she's gonna think I'm disrespecting her here.
Imagine. No way.
As if.
No.
Yeah. So thank you very much for joining us on Quiet Conversations. And today we're just continuing a conversation on mental health that's based basically on suicide. And last time when we spoke with Tenda, we were talking about scenarios that we looked at, like the scenario with Boss Zonke, aka now I'm forgetting Rick, that's his name. Ricky Mercado. Yeah, he committed suicide, in the beginning of the year. And that was kind of like a big thing. And, for me, as I said last time, I was just saying that, I was just going to speak as an arrogant and misinformed person to say that, we have this issue where I feel like, I'll be speaking, and even with this conversation I'm going to have with Faith, I want to talk to you as a person as well, who's misinformed, arrogant, and who doesn't know what he's saying. But I'm just going to say things because that's how people perceive these things in our society, So, for example, people say that, when someone commits suicide, they're being selfish. There's terms like that, and I'll say, yeah, I feel like he was being selfish in doing that because now it affects everyone else, and everyone else goes through some form of mental health problems. So welcome, Faith, and yeah, what would you say to me if I was to come to you and say, you know what, I am, yeah. I feel like I want to commit suicide, but like, where do I go? Where do I begin? Where do I start? What do I do?
What do you do?
Yeah.
I think The most important thing is to understand that a person doesn't start by wanting to commit suicide, right?
Yeah.
It's not the beginning. Usually that's like the result of a journey or an experience that started long ago.
Yeah.
Some that would have been undetected, some that was silent, some that was, they were dealing with for a long time or whatever. And then now when they come to you and they're saying, I want to commit suicide, it's now a symptom of that.
Yeah.
So often more than focusing too much on the wanting to commit suicide, I want to know why.
Yeah.
What's your reason for now wanting to feeling as though this is now it or it's over, and you'll find more often than not that there's a lot of things that the person needs to unpack. There's a lot of exhaustion, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of struggle, there's a lot of things that they are having to deal with in their lives, that eventually they get to that point where they're like, it's too much.
Yeah.
A lot of them say that it's too much, like I can't take it anymore, or I just want to escape.
Yeah.
Like I need to rest. So, I'd start there at why. How did we get here?
Yeah.
And I think that's, just to mention what you said about how people often say that it's selfish, right? And I think, that also comes from a place of not realizing that for a person to get to that final point, what we're seeing now is someone now being over the edge, right?
Yeah.
But you didn't see where they were for them to get pushed up to the point where they're over the edge. Do you know what I mean? And so I think it's so important to understand that it's a process that gets someone to that point.
Yeah.
And we need to be more aware of that.
Yeah. And at the same time, I've got a friend of mine who so there's a post that I once put on my socials at some point where I was speaking. I just added some numbers that you could call, people that you could contact and stuff like that. And then he was like, you know what? He sent me this message. I'm just going to read the message. And he's like, I'm very suicidal and have been for a long time. It is what makes me seem so bubbly and influential in my realms. So what I want to query is, how would a suicidal like myself even begin to call anyone before ending their life? And we call months before, and when help doesn't come, we end up choosing otherwise. So that was kind of like the conversation we were having there.
So just give me clarity. He's saying how would a suicidal person like,
yeah, kind of how would a suicidal person like him who seems to be bubbly and an influential person in his realms, like, so what he wants to query is that how would a suicidal person like himself even begin to call anyone before ending their lives? So who do you contact, but how do you go about that? How would you tell someone who's going through something like that?
So basically, I just need clarity. He's trying to figure out, how do I bring myself to calling someone or informing someone when I'm feeling that hopeless.
Yeah.
Right? I think the mere fact that he's able to start that conversation with you is him doing that.
Okay.
Do you understand?
Yeah.
The mere fact that he has this question, and it's not a question that he internalized, it's a question that he vocalized, is him taking the first step. Remember that when you cry out for help, as someone who's suicidal, you don't necessarily always have to say, okay, listen, I want to kill myself.
Yeah.
It can literally be as simple as, I need help, I'm struggling, reaching out to someone, and just saying that I can't take it anymore. All of those little steps, the fact that you're not silent, one of the big things that the people that we've seen them complete the suicide, and these are the ones that are the most high risk, or the ones who are silent. The ones who are silent at the moment, because another thing, remember that there's a lot of shame around having those thoughts. So people are scared of vocalizing because people are going to think that I'm weak, especially men. People are going to think that I'm weak. People are going to think that I'm trying to be a victim. People are going to think that I'm trying to get attention. My pain is not valid. All of those reasons make people silent. And that's the most dangerous place, because when you're silent, these thoughts continuously eat at you. The pain continuously eats at you. And eventually they become such a loud voice that overpowers you, and you find yourself then completing. But if you can put yourself in a space where, no matter how tempting it is to be quiet, refusing to be quiet, I think that's the biggest step that you can take for yourself, refusing to be quiet and saying something to someone.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's one of the biggest things, A lot of times as well, I can't in any way help a patient if they haven't said anything to me. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So that's my biggest thing. Don't be silent. Don't be silent.
And if you do see also, if you do see kind of like, in lack of a better word, if you do see symptoms of a person being suicidal, then how do you get them to speak out from that space?
So now there's the role of the clinician, and there's the role of like a family member or what, right?
Yeah.
But the main thing that I'd say is general advice is, remember that when a person is in this state, right, they're in a state of distress, right? And the most important thing is to create a safe space for them, right? Yeah. So not coming from a point of, I'm accusing you, I am judging you, I want you to give me answers, because that could also be overwhelming.
Yeah.
A person who's in such a state needs a safe space, right? And a safe space, not necessarily geographically, but emotionally, right? Yeah. So if you're going to identify this, you also need to be aware of the space that you're creating for them when you open the conversation, right? Because they need to know that even if I speak this, it's going to be received, right? Remember that our goal is to prevent people who are struggling with these thoughts from being silenced. But if I'm going to come with an aggressive approach, then what am I doing? I'm pushing them away, and then I'm pushing them into silence, and they're at more of a risk of committing it, right? Okay. So creating a safe space, but also being very tactful, right? There are certain instances where I won't outright ask, do you want to commit suicide? Right? Because that's intrusive. Yeah, it's intrusive. But at this point, I realize that this person is struggling, so I build a relationship. I build a trusting relationship, right? I extend a helping hand. I'm here if you want to talk, okay? Talk about other things, but basically, my intention is to build a relationship, to say, I'm interested in you, and I'm here. Yeah. Right. And then over time, sometimes you don't have much time. Maybe as the conversation progresses, you can then start introducing other elements of it. But it's important to just really also be tactful, Okay. But really, and remember, it's not about, like, at times we go into these conversations in order to drive our own agendas. Like, I want to stop you from committing suicide. Right. Whereas now if you're going to go there, you're going to push the conversation to go in the direction that you want it to go to. Whereas there's a need that the other person has that's not necessarily met. Right? Because you're trying to drive your own. Yeah. So that's basically that would be my approach and my advice.
So now you get to a place, or in part of the conversation, you do get to a space where a lot of people tend to say, but you don't understand what I'm going through. You don't understand what's happening with me right now. Then how do I make that person help me understand what they're going through?
So it's not even necessarily about making them help you understand, right? So at times you may not even be able to understand, but displaying the willingness to try and the willingness to meet them at the point of their need as much as you can, right? Because at times you may not be able to, right?
Yeah.
But then also just recognizing your own limitations
Yeah.
in that regard. There are times where what you offer may not necessarily be what they need, and being able to identify that, right?
Yeah.
So knowing that, okay, maybe I'm talking to someone who had experienced, like, very traumatic experience. They were raped, right?
Yeah.
And they're struggling with it, and then they come to you, but then they say, you don't understand. I may not be able to understand. I won't understand because I've never experienced it. So what could help is talking to someone who's been through that and was able to get through that. At times it's easier for them to see hope in their circumstance if they see someone who's been through what they've been through and they've gone through it. Do you know what I mean? So not trying to be superheroes, Remember, it's not about us. It's about them.
Yeah.
If they feel that they're not understood, try to. But if you can't, acknowledge that you don't. But remember, another thing is your inability to understand completely doesn't take away from the level of support that you can give.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
It doesn't take away from the support. You can still give support. You can still acknowledge that you have pain, and I'm even naming it. Acknowledge that it's hard for you. Acknowledge that it's overwhelming, right? I may not understand the extent of it, but I acknowledge it, right? And right now, maybe all we need to do is to acknowledge it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm creating a space for you to, because now you know that this is a space that acknowledges it. Whenever you feel sad, whenever you feel defeated, whenever you feel anxious, you know that you can come into this space that's me.
Yeah.
Because it's acknowledged, it's there, it exists.
Yeah.
So I will be able to relate to you in that way.
Okay. Yeah, and then after acknowledging that and all, then how then do I get the person, like how do I keep myself at a space where I can be patient with that person? Because sometimes you get impatient. We are human beings. I do get impatient sometimes as well, and I'm trying to help you out, but you are not giving me that space for me to help you out. Now, how do I? What steps do I take to help myself be patient with the person that's going through depression at that time?
And this is, the more we understand mental illness, the more you understand suicide, the more you understand circumstances that lead to people being in this space, it helps you then be able to grasp, right? So you come in, once you have that background understanding, when you enter this conversation, you're now entering it knowing the extent of which the person, the extent of emotions or the extent of struggle that the person is experiencing. And therefore that then puts you in a position of already you're empowered in that regard. Do you know what I mean? So I always like making examples of like other illnesses or other conditions. So for instance, we all know, right? It's common knowledge that if you break your leg, right, the person is gonna, firstly, they need to go to the doctor, they need to get x-rays, they need to get pain medication, they need to get a cast and all of that stuff. And it's a process. They work with crutches, all of that, right? It's something that we all know. So the moment you're approached by a person who has a broken leg, that's automatically that's your default setting. That's what you understand. So when you see them walk a certain way, you behave a certain way around them, so you don't further injure them because of that place of knowledge and understanding.
Yeah.
And I feel as though we don't have, or rather we don't take enough time to have that same understanding for mental illness and for suicide, you know. And now imagine if we did. You know, you then understand that the person who is suicidal is very much the same as a person who has a broken leg. Right? And if you're able to execute the same patience that you had for the person with the broken leg, then therefore the same patience that is executed there is the same patience that's required for the suicidal person.
Okay.
You know? Yeah. So if we can take it from that part, informing ourselves, truly informing ourselves, not just reading on the surface, truly informing ourselves. If it's something you don't get, talk to people who do. You know, talk to people who've been through the struggle, truly understand, removing the judgmental eyes that we have, the preconceived ideas, all of those things, you're moving on with that and actually coming into it and be like, I truly want to understand, right? And therefore, when you do, it then changes the way that you approach.
Okay. But now, if I was to look at it from this way and say that when people are to commit suicide and all, and think of it in terms of, I always think of a friend of mine who supposedly committed suicide. We're still kind of waiting for the right autopsy results and all that stuff. But just the thought of that, let's just say he did commit suicide. Out of that, what he's done has affected me as a friend. It's affected his baby mama who was pregnant at the time. You know? It's affected his mother, who's still trying to figure out, like, what happened? I could have helped you, but you didn't come, you know? It's affected his siblings. So now, when I say, sometimes when I say I feel like people are being selfish, because now you're saying, a person will be saying, no, but you don't understand me, right? At the same time, I'm like, but no, you're being selfish because you're not giving me a chance to understand you. At the same time, should you commit suicide, what you're doing is you're causing other people to have mental health problems, or to start going through depression and in their lives because of what you would have done. So now, how do I then try to convince that person not to go ahead with committing suicide? How do I then make them understand that this is what I'm trying to say, that there's people that love you here, and you going away does not mean that you are because some would say, no, I'm leaving because I don't want to trouble you anymore. But you doing that has made others, you know, even with Ricky Rig, that same week, just like a week after, one of the kids that I mentored in one of the schools when I was still in Centurion, the kid that I mentored was already planning on committing suicide at that time. But lucky, you know, we kind of found everything and managed to help him out. But it was one of those things where you're an influential person and now you're influencing others to do the same thing. How do we address this, looking at it from that angle?
Okay, I'm going to ask you to clarify the second part, but I just want to just address the notion of there's so many people that you're going to affect.
Yeah.
You're being selfish. You need to think about the consequences. And once again, I go back to the fact that now imagine yourself as Alvis or anyone else. Can you imagine taking a gun and putting it on your head, like, blowing your own brains out? Like, the thought of that, it's terrifying. Like, how?
Yeah.
Right? What would take a person to get to a point where they're able to hang themselves, suffocate, think about it, plan it, suffocate, endure that pain so that they can be removed? I can't even comprehend that.
Yeah.
That would tell us the level of, I don't want to say pain, but just how affected they are for them to get to the point where they're capable of doing that.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's something that we don't really think about because we've never, the person who understands that this headspace of a person who commits suicide and completes is the person who commits suicide and completes. And unfortunately, they're the ones who are already gone. Right? That's the person who can tell you how bad it must be for them to get to that point. And remember that these are individuals who, like you said, have families, right? I think it's very unfair of us to think that they have not looked at all of these things. And you could find that they've fought it, but they possibly get to a point where they are so incapacitated that they can no longer, everything else is no longer able to get them out of this dark place. Right? It's incapable of getting them out of this dark place. I think the human mind is not able to comprehend just how bad it must be. Right? And that's why I really truly refrain from calling them selfish, because I cannot understand that level of dark space. Right? Because I've never been there. And like I said, the only one who can truly tell me is a person who's done it and completed it. So then how do we prevent a person from getting into that space, right? One of the hardest things I, as a doctor, have had to learn, that I can't save everyone, right? I can't save everyone. I could say everything, but I can't go into a person's mind, right? But what we can do before it gets there, right? Like what you're saying, sometimes people say that they're a burden. So what we do is we vocalize or we communicate to the individual that they're not actually a burden, right? And we do it in a manner that's going to reassure them and that's going to offer support. So one of the main things is support. Like support. We always, whenever we discharge patients, wherever we see them, we always make sure that they have a ring of support, because they're at a point where they're emotionally weak and emotionally vulnerable, and they need that extra amount of love, right? And so support, right? No judgment. Remember that you could easily find that these individuals are already judgmental of themselves, right? A lot of them are mothers, a lot of them are friends, a lot of them are leaders, a lot of them are influential people. And already there's just so much judgment towards themselves. Like, how are you thinking about this? You're so weak. All of these negative words, negative thoughts in their mind, that if we're now going to come externally and add to that, we're only making it worse. Right? So we don't come with judgment. We empower. We give hope, right? And hope is not always easy to give, but we give hope. And we give, what I do is sometimes we make, now this is in the clinical space, we'll make a contract with the patient, right? I'll be like, okay, let's take it day by day. Because sometimes when they comprehend, when they have to think about the next week, it's too much. Okay, what do we do? We're like, okay, so let's not think about the next week. Let's think about the next day. Right? And let's try to conquer the next day. Okay? And then you just take, and then we do a contract. They'll write a promise, I'll write a promise, and then I'll be like, okay, then tomorrow we'll revisit this contract. Okay. So it's a bit by bit, day by day. And it's this reassurance that I'm here to walk this with you.
Yeah.
I'm not judging you. I understand that I don't understand. Maybe I may not fully understand the extent of what you're going through, but I understand that it's really bad.
Yeah.
Right? And you want out. But I'm here to help you through this dark space. Right?
Yeah.
Let me take it bit by bit. Yeah. And like I said, like empowering them, giving them hope. At times then we'll, like you said, we'll mention certain aspects which are important, like for mothers. Right? So the mothers, that's where you emphasize how valuable they are. Remember, you don't guilt trip them. Don't say, so what's going to happen to everyone? Because it's yeah. But you'll remind them of their value, you know?
Yeah.
Of what they contribute to society, what they're contributing, the meaning. You ask them about their dreams, about their ambitions, all of those things. And those are things that are communicating to the brain that, wait, there still is something for me, you know. And even if they don't have anything on that day, you're triggering something.
Yeah.
And so you're triggering something. You're starting conversation, and then the next day, bit by bit. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I like how you bring in the whole idea of giving hope to a person, you know, and which is one thing that we have lost in our society today. We don't give people hope. We don't bring hope to people. You know, for us growing up, you know, we had so much hope. The days when we used to dance, my biggest hope was to become the next Usher Raymond type of thing. You know? But you know, that kept me going, and now we at a point where even the people that are supposed to give you hope are just like, you know, it's okay, whatever, you know, and I think that's a good route or a good way to do things, to take that route of giving hope to the person. And I think the more we add a positive vibe to each other, or a positive or just bring in positive ideas to one another, it will help us not to lose hope, not to lose faith in everything that we do. So then another thing that I wanted to just say was, how about young people who are at high school, or just at high school? Let's look at high school, because why I want to talk about this, there's one of the schools around here where there were 2 young people that actually committed suicide.
That's horrible.
And that's really horrible. It really took a big, like, let these kids, it kind of let people down, you know. It put us in a very bad space, and that happened about 3 weeks ago.
Sure.
So there's that as well. One of them had actually reached out to a few of his friends and was like, you know what, he's not coping with life. He's trying to get himself, you know, in a clear space. The other one just wrote a letter, jumped off a balcony, and you know, they found him in the cliff there on the rocks. The other one hung himself. But that whole thing of what can parents do to help their children not to get to that point, you know, what pressures are we giving our children? What things are we doing to our kids to get them to that point of just giving up on life? How can we help such a person, especially with kids, you know, who are at high school?
I think the one thing that I also struggled with, I think a lot of us struggled with, is that you want to make your parents proud.
Yeah.
You know, you want to make your parents proud. And at times, especially as they grow, They may be fearful of speaking about their struggles. They may be fearful of speaking about things they're encountering. Maybe they've made a bad decision, right? Maybe they've gotten themselves into some trouble, and they're afraid because should I speak out, I'm going to disappoint my parents, right? It's that. And then also the type of parenting, right? If as a parent you're too harsh and you create an environment that is not safe for a child to talk, that's also putting them at risk because they talk to people who are external and they don't come home and talk, right? So the fear, okay. So that's one of the things. It really puts children at a very vulnerable place because then they're vulnerable to external advice. They learn from TV because that's where the conversations that they're having are had, right, in their head. And then also, I think another thing is not having, you know how certain topics, and it's not parents' fault, right? Because, parents, their intentions, most parents, or a lot of parents, their intentions are good for their children. And then they think that not having certain conversations is protecting their children. Right? Because you don't want to suggest. But you'll find that actually has an adverse effect because that means that there's certain topics that aren't going to be discussed at home. And what does that do? The child then goes and receives information externally, talks externally, suffers internally, and then such things happen. So I think that parents creating a home that has open conversations. I understand that as parents it may be difficult to have certain conversations, but rather be uncomfortable with talking about something than have to deal with the pain of silence. Being able to create a space for your children to vocalize and to express their feelings. Also creating a space where, yes, listen, discipline is important and teaching your children the right way, but it shouldn't be to the point where now the kid gets into trouble and then they can't come home and say, I'm in this situation because I'm scared of what's going to happen to me. So all of that, creating that space where they can still come back and knowing that even though I'm disappointed in you, I'm your parent and I've got your back. And that does wonders for the child, and then also just really harnessing healthy relationships in the home. One of the main things, and I see it with adult patients actually, because we always look back in childhood. Conflict, exposing children, exposing teens to conflict, constant conflict, really has really bad effects on them, right? So reducing the conflict, the violence within the home, also helps because when they're exposed to that as children, they're unable to regulate their emotions, right? They start developing certain habits and all of that because as a child, you're not able to say, I'm feeling anxious, right? You feel irritable and then you want something that's going to numb. You don't know that you're self-medicating and all of those things. So also being careful at the home that the kids are exposed to from childhood and growing up, you know? And that also prevents them from wanting to find comfort and safety externally, right? Because a lot of times you'll find that they'll say, home is too much. Home is, my parents are too harsh at home, or my parents are always fighting at home. Therefore, I'd rather be outside. Right? And all of those things. I think those are the few things that parents can be mindful of, to prevent situations from getting, to that extent. One thing that I have seen parents do, which I think is really great, is accessing help soon. The moment you start seeing or you start suspecting that there may be a problem, don't delay it. Don't make excuses or say, it's just fine, just teenagers. That's something that's often done. No, take the steps. Get them help. If we're able to start seeing them at an early age, there's many things that we can prevent from taking place late in adulthood. So getting help as quickly as you start feeling as though something's wrong, and paying attention to them as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and just creating an environment where it's safe to speak about things. That's one thing that I actually would say, just to digress a bit. There used to be a program on TV, on SABC called Yizo Yizo, at some
Yeah.
point. And just to think of everything that was going through in that program, those are things that a lot of our kids go through at school, in society, in the townships, and all that. And that was actually a good program for parents to look at as a conversation starter. As much as some of the things were kind of very explicit, but them being explicit was kind of showing that this is how things are, and those are things that we need to look at as a form of conversation starters, so that it creates an awareness with our kids, with children, with just families, creating an awareness to say such things happen. Bullying happens at school. There's times when your teacher is the one who's trying to, who's oppressing you in a way.
Yeah.
And you're finding it so hard because your parents are saying you need to pass, and you can't stop because your parents believe in what your teacher says, So all these things happen, and because now you're overwhelmed, then boom, you decide, okay, let me just take my life, and those are things that we go through. So it does make sense. I think we need to create spaces like that in our homes. You need to create spaces that are open to healing, especially. Yeah.
And I think,
yeah.
Sorry to cut you. I think another thing that just came to mind is also, remember that right now we're in the digital age. So social media, movies, everything, that's actually one of the main channels that educates kids. And then you'll find that because the young brain is the developing brain, let me say, struggles to separate between what is right and what is
wrong.
not. Yeah. They're still developing. And so it's important to actually have conversations about coping strategies, right?
Yeah.
So you'll find that on TV, you'll watch and people are smoking because they're stressed, or people are cutting themselves because they're stressed, and for them that is communicating that, this is a way to cope with stress. And then they get to a point in their lives where they start experiencing it, and then what do? They adopt these unhealthy coping mechanisms that are communicated to them by the media. But if as a parent you start having these conversations about healthy coping mechanisms, acknowledging that, listen, anxiety takes place, stressful circumstances take place, all of these things are things that take place in life, and therefore these are the ways that you can cope with them. I think that also will help as they grow. And I think these are conversations that can be started like earlier on, that as they grow, breathing techniques, all of those things, as they grow and they start encountering all these stressful circumstances, already you've started the foundation around how to cope with adverse circumstances in life. So I think that's also very important.
That's true. And I don't know what, maybe let me say, how do we land this plane in terms of trying to figure out, trying to fix and remove the idea of suicide, or try to speak on it. How do we find solutions, or what things, maybe just to land it, what steps can we take for us to get to a point where we are healing and we're helping one another and all that?
What steps can we take? I think I'm very big on starting from, the kids, Remember I said that when a person gets to the point of suicide, it starts somewhere, right? And then rectifying those things, reducing the traumas that people experience in childhood, reducing the conflicts within the family, reducing the substance abuse, reducing all of these various elements, and then also harnessing healthy conversations, removing stigma. Guys, stigma and mental health are the biggest things. I experienced stigma as a mental health care practitioner. I myself experienced stigma. So having more conversations about these things, acknowledging the pain, acknowledging the struggle, but also acknowledging that it is defeatable if we all come together and we're supportive of one another. I think another thing is, out of this side in Mpumalanga, I don't think there's much, rather where I stay, but I remember that there used to be, those programs like Love Life.
Yeah.
Like these teens used to be able to go there and, do activities and stuff like that. So having such programs, or having programs where we actually speak to the children, speak to the teens, speak to adults, where we educate, where we normalize, and actually, and not just on social media, actually going physically to the schools, to the churches, to the communities, to the hospitals, all of those things, actually going out into the field and doing the dirty work. I really think that for the people who have the knowledge, it's important for us to get up and actually go in and do the dirty work. I imagine that if I get up and I go and I speak at a school, right? I'm speaking to 100 or so students, right?
Yeah.
Who knows that maybe I could reach at least 5, right? Who are suicidal. You know what I mean? So actually going out and speaking and getting our hands dirty, because the thing about mental health is actually very messy. It's very messy, and it needs people who, not even people, it needs us as society to be more aware and cognizant of the fact that in order for us to combat it, we all need to come together.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, that's what I think. It's a long process, but it's something, but I think it's something that if we were all to just put our hands together and start acknowledging just how real it is, how serious it is, and how much it needs from us, and actually committing ourselves to doing the work.
All right. No, thank you very much, Dr. Faith. My voice is disappearing, bits and pieces. Okay. Yeah. So I guess we're gonna land the plane here for today, and then we will do another recording. And thank you so much for the information that you've shared, and I hope that you enjoy and continue doing what you do at its best. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, thanks, Faith. Cheers.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.